Hey, welcome back. Look, I haven't got my new camera yet. There's probably still a blur right in here somewhere, but I did want to bring you some more content before I just sat around waiting on the new camera to get here. It's not that bad, so hopefully this will come through well enough. But what I want to talk about today, I know I picked up a few subscribers that are new to bourbon, and I just want to talk about the journey of walking through, and I have some hand-selected things that I have from my shelf. I can't put everything out here, and I can't talk about all the bourbons because that would take an hour or two. So let's stick with these basics, and then I will help maybe get you started on your journey and where to go along that road right after this. All right, we're back. Before we get started, I just want to say you probably hear people talk about starter bourbons. These on the left over here pretty much I consider to be good starter bourbons. And what we're talking about is bourbons that don't have a lot of complex notes to them, because you're going to get overwhelmed. If you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what you're tasting for and nosing for, it's probably going to be too much. And we also don't want you to go too far down a path that you wouldn't have started on. And that way you taste something and you would have preferred to go down this other path, but now you taste this and it's so complex and so deep into what the wrong path is for you that it just turns you away from bourbon right off the bat. So we don't want to put you down, get you too far down a road. So basically, it's the same with beer, with wine, with bourbon, with all kinds of whiskeys. You have sweet and you have dry. Okay, so the opposite of sweet is dry. And for a good starter bourbon that's on the sweet end, this one right here, Elijah Craig. I get a lot of honeysuckle out of this. I get a lot of the sweeter sugars right across the middle of the tongue. Not a lot of depth on the outside. You get a little new wood out of it, but not a lot of deep, dark, woody notes out of this. You certainly aren't getting into leathers or tobaccos or anything like that. This is a good sweet starter bourbon. I think if you put it up against Larceny, I think Larceny is a little drier, not as sweet. It's still, they're all going to be sweet. Bourbons are 51% corn in the mash bill at a minimum. So just remember that. Corn is sugar. I mean, it's sweet. Corn syrup, they use corn syrup to flavor, sodas and things like that. Corn is inherently sweet. And so are carrots and things like that. They make carrot cake. But you're going to have some sweetness. You're not going to get a really, really dry bourbon. Now, if you go into the 100% rye, but now you're not bourbon anymore, you're into whiskeys. And I have 100% rye, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about bourbon. This to me is on the drier side, whereas Elijah Craig, sweeter side. So this is going to, there's still a few noted, okay? You're going to get about 4 or 5 good notes out of this. You're going to get some vanilla, some fresh apple. You're going to get maybe some really, really light caramel out of it and some new woody notes. And that's about it, okay? And you may pick up some flowers, maybe some wildflowery, honeysuckle type stuff. That's what you're going to get out of here. But if you start with this is a good price bourbon, very reasonably priced, and it will start you down that where you start getting those basic bourbon notes, right? This one's going to have much of the same. You're going to have some vanillas in it, but this is on the drier side, not as many sweets, not the honeysuckle. And so you're going to start getting more leaning toward a peppery or some more wood notes and things like that. This is still very minimal in the note department. So either one of these, if you try them both and you're like, you know what, I prefer Elijah Craig, that's the one path you want to take. If you like Elijah Craig and you want to step it up a little bit, I know some people call Eagle Rare a starter bourbon, but it's if you go from Elijah Craig to Eagle Rare, you're going to be on that same type of path, but it has far more notes to it than Elijah Craig. Another good starter one here, very, very reasonably priced, is Bird Dog. Now, whereas out of these two, you're going to get 4 or 5 notes, this is really slim in the note department. But you are going to get the vanilla, you are going to get the apple, you're going to get some of those basic bourbon notes, and it's kind of in between these two as far as sweet and dry. So I don't really recommend it to start you on your journey, because you're still at a fork in the road. Now, if you go side with one of these over the other, then you're more on your way. For a blended bourbon, really, really good bourbon here for the price is Four Roses Small Batch. Now, this is going to be a little more complexity. You're starting to get more toward the Eagle Rare, in my opinion, with this one, but not as deep and dark, right? So they will take different bourbons and choose them. Now, the big brother of this, if you want to talk about blends, because of, 4 roses, 4 bourbons, Breckenridge is another one. There's differences. We talk about blended bourbons. Blended bourbons are hand-selected bourbons that are then blended together, mixed together to create a taste profile and a note profile from bourbons. Now, Breckenridge distills all of their bourbons, and I believe I have reviewed all of these, maybe except Michter's, so you can go back and look through the reviews. Another blended bourbon that's really, really good. Now, this is high dollar, okay? This is going to be on the upper expensive end, but Barrel Bourbon, they procure their bourbons. They do not distill them. So Barrel buys their bourbons, hand-selected, gets them, blends them together. They do an amazing job with this. You're going to get sweet. You're going to get dry. You're going to get oak. You're going to get, a little conical in there. You're starting to get into some full complexity here with this one. Now, since we're on that finished bourbons, this one is actually considered a finished bourbon, but I know I said in my review, I don't really consider it a finished bourbon. I reserve that more for Angel's Envy, that's finished in port wine barrels. This one is along the same lines as like Maker 46. So Maker's Mark is a fine starter bourbon in and of itself. I just don't have it up here. I think it's a little, I'm not a huge fan of Maker's Mark, the regular. Now, the Maker's 46, what they do is they age it in new oak barrels to be called bourbon, 51% corn or more in the mash. But then what they do is they transfer it from the new oak barrel into an unused barrel with French oak staves, and that's Maker's 46. What they do here is they transfer the Woodford Reserve into what did they call it here? Finished in a second oak barrel, but it's heavily charred. So this gives you your double oak, but there's been nothing else in that barrel. It says right there, a second oak barrel, but it's still a second new oak barrel. I mean, but they're not infusing like port wine or rum or sherry or anything like that into the bourbon. Now, this is one of my new favorites. I just tried it. This one here, it's got Matthew McConaughey's name on it, but Eddie Russell's on there, so we know who distilled it or came up with the mash bill and all, master distiller Eddie Russell. Long Branch, this is Wild Turkey, and it's one of their versions. There's Wild Turkey 101, and there's different ones, but this is Long Branch. This is really complex. After trying this one, I went and bought 2 more of them because this is a very reasonably priced bourbon right now. It's sub $40 here. And so geographic location prices may vary, but right now this is a very reasonably priced bourbon that gives you, this thing has legs for days. I mean, it coats the glass really well. What that means is you're going to get a good tongue coating. You're going to typically get a longer finish or follow after you swallow. And so you're going to taste it, further down. And this, I know it says Oak and Texas Mesquite Charcoal Refined. I don't know what that means. I haven't looked it up. I don't know if I really want to know because it is just fantastic. But I can tell you that mesquite, whatever they've done with the mesquite, I can taste it. Mesquite is inherently sweet on the smoke. So if you smoke meat with mesquite, I am going to be looking into more on this. And I know this may have been influenced by Matthew McConaughey's taste, maybe talking to Eddie or whatever, and working with Wild Turkey. But still, this is a fantastic bourbon. Now, one of the ones that are my true favorites, but wait for this until you're down your journey a little bit. So start figuring out what you like from these tamer bourbons before you get into this. But this is from Stitzel Distillery. It used to be Stitzel Weller, and then Weller, it was bought by Buffalo Trace. And so this is a Julian Van Winkle recipe here, Blade and Bow, but they can't really use his name on there, I don't think. Stitzel Weller Distilling, Louisville, Kentucky, but this is distilled by Stitzel. And then what they do is they have a Solera aging system, and it's patented. So what they do is they have all these bourbon barrels, and they age the bourbon for I think it's 8 years. It might be 10. I'll have to look it up again, but 8 to 10 years or something like that on the bourbon in the barrel, and then they never fully drain the barrel. They leave some bourbon in the bottom of the barrel, and I don't really know how much, but probably a fourth of the barrel or whatever. And so that bourbon continues to age, and then they put new bourbon back in on top of it. So this is really complex. This is going to give you a lot of depth, a lot of woody notes, oaky notes. You're getting into your leathers and tobaccos here, for sure. Now, Michter's, they make all kinds of whiskeys and bourbons and everything else, but this is a really good, if you want to continue down the path from say Elijah Craig on the sweeter side and come on up, here you go right here. This is going to give you a good sweet complexity. I know I brought up W.L. Weller and things like that from the Buffalo Trace line. And Eagle Rare is a part of that line. And of course, Buffalo Trace, that whole line goes from up in through from Buffalo Trace, the bourbon, the basic bourbon. I have a bottle of it up there. I have Eagle Rare up there as well. Buffalo Trace is going to be, I call it the backwoods bourbon. It's really great with cigars and for sitting around a fire. I would not put a cigar with this one. I would wait till I got into some more advanced bourbons. If you want to really smoke a cigar with them, anything from like maybe here over, maybe even in here, but you're going to start masking the notes in your bourbon if you smoke the cigar. So, but this is where you're going to get into the meatier stuff over in here, especially with this one. This would pair well with some more robust cigars. But some of these, like I said, it's just going to mask the flavor. I think the weakest one I have on the shelf is probably Basil Hayden's. And that's a Beam Suntory. And so you're going to get Russell's Reserve. You're going to get Knob Creek's, and of course, Jim Beam, basic bourbon. I wouldn't even start anyone on Jim Beam. Start, with Knob Creek. If you want to get started on the Beam Suntory line, start with just the regular Knob Creek at about 100 proof and go from there. But really, this is my premier bourbon go-to for a starter. Either that, or if you think it's too sweet and you don't really like it, go to Larceny. Or pick up a bottle of both of these. I think you can probably get both of these for at around $50, if not under. Again, geographic location prices may vary, but I think they're both in the 20s. So, you're not hurting anything by trying some of this, and Bird Dog's probably even cheaper than that. But now, like I said, this is going to be a higher price bourbon. This one around here is definitely plus 50, on the high side. I forget what I paid for that. This one right now is a steal around here. And that's why I went and bought 2 more bottles of it, because people are going to start figuring this one out and the price isn't going to stay there. This one is a little pricier, and I think Michter's is up there. as well, but not, I think it's still sub 50. But you know, you're talking about between these 3 bottles. Well, if I take this bottle, and say this one, I think you're up around $200 plus, you know, just for 3 of them. But if you bought these 3, you're well under $100 on all 3 bottles. So, you know, that's kind of putting it in perspective. So, if you have any questions, if you need to know more, hit me up in the comments down below. As always, please like and subscribe, and I'll keep bringing you these videos.